First, if I can pinch a phrase from Gough Whitlam in 1972, it's time. It is time for the Labor Party to wake up to itself. Julia Gillard is finished. Her credibility is shot. The government is paralysed by this. Her office is dysfunctional. We saw that with the grubby little act around the Australia Day protest. That's not government, that's just grubby manipulation. The latest poll today in News Poll in the Australian shows that Labor is at its weakest point ever. Now, Julia Gillard's personal rating is not as disastrous as some have been, but the government would be decimated. She hasn't made up ground over the holiday. The coalition would easily win an election. Labor's primary vote is 30%. Now, the papers report today that the parliamentary factions are counting numbers. Kevin Rudd's warming the knife. The party's in freefall. This isn't good for the country, because everybody in Labor is focusing on political survival rather than running the country. The party could be decimated on these figures. That's not good for the country either. You need an opposition. You need two strong parties. That's why it is time. I think Julia Gillard will have to go soon, and Kevin Rudd is not the answer. Remember, he's the man behind the pink bats fiasco, which he never actually understood. He's the man behind the school halls, that massive waste, school halls without doors. He's the man who really changed the policy on boat people. He's the man who thought he was king. He wasn't Prime Minister, he was king for life. Can't go back to him. Bill Shorten's a future leader, but not yet, and he said as much to me on air here. So I think the best answer for Labor is Simon Crean. Go back to Simon Crean. The country needs stability. He is that. He is stable. Voters know what he is, know who he is. People know what he stands for. The government needs credibility. I don't think there's many more credible people on that side of politics than Simon Crean. He is overwhelmingly decent. The party and the country need experience. He's got that. Minister several times, opposition leader, contacts, experience. He's been in Parliament 22 years, a former ACDU president. Simon Crean, in my view, is Labor's best chance of doing something sensible. Now, I doubt they'll do it, but they should. And soon, very soon, so they can forget all this squabbling and get back to running the country. 96900 693 13 13 32. Would you support him? Look, I know he's had a go, and usually nobody would return, but there's talk of a return to Kevin Rudd. Crean has been decent enough not to run a campaign behind the scenes, unlike Rudd, who looks like he wants it so badly he'd cut off an arm. Simon Crean knows the brief. He can talk sensibly about policy. He can sell policies. He has some intellectual depth. And have a look at John Howard. Perhaps Simon Crean is the John Howard of the Labor side. Now, you'll love that. But John Howard was finished. He was gone, done and dusted. He was Mr 18% as opposition leader. 18% popularity. Dumped by the party. He came back. And 8 years later, he was Prime Minister. One of the best Australia's had. Simon Crean got down to 18% personal popularity just before he was dumped. Well, 8 years later is now. Perhaps you could do a John Howard. And remember this, at his worst, Simon Crean's Labor Party had a far better standing than Julia Gillard's government now has. He got down as low as 33% primary vote. When he was dumped as leader, he had a 36% primary vote. Julia Gillard has been down to 26%. So her worst was 10 points behind what Simon Crean was dumped on. She's now 30%. But have a look at the Howard example. He was unpopular. He needed a makeover. The party turned to him in desperation after Alexander Downer self-destructed as leader. Howard was a desperation measure. He turned him into one of the most successful Liberal Prime Ministers in history. People felt they knew him. He was stable after the instability of Paul Keating. He took politics off the front page. It is exactly what Simon Crean could do. And I repeat, I don't think the party will do it. I think they should. The best thing for them. But more important, until the next election, it would be the best thing for the country. Stable, credible, slightly dull, reliable leadership.